Call from Brandon.
Oh, I'm doing the Zoom meeting with everyone. Well, we're going to start in 4 minutes. Oh my God. Okay. Right, sounds good. Okay.
It's been a while since I've heard that.
Yeah.
I'm like, that was me? I knew how to play that at one point. I should work on that again.
So, hello everyone. My name is Anna Brake, and if you know anything about me, you know that I love asking people questions and finding out more about them and finding out more about what they do and what they're passionate about. And I also love helping people in ways that I can. Most of my friends are independent contractors or small business owners or type like that. Hold on, I have to admit someone else. And so I mostly like hanging out with people, I guess, who are kind of like me in the sense that they love the freedom of being their own boss. And one of the hardest things about being an entrepreneur, especially that of service, is finding clients. And referrals are one of the best ways to grow your business. And so what I want to do with this small business spotlight, this is going to be a reoccurring thing. And I want to do like a large scale referral for the people that I normally refer out, like on a one-on-one situation. So like if I were having a conversation, someone brings up piano, I'd be like, oh, I have a friend, Grace Odell. She's great. She's awesome at giving piano lessons. And so since now we're like having less interactions with people and, you know, especially meeting new people, it's harder to do that right now. So my intention with this is to just kind of spread the word about small business owners in the best way that I can. So my first small business spotlight is for Grace Odell. And we went to school together. She was getting her master's in musicology and piano performance while I was getting my master's in composition. That was back when I was still doing music. And unlike me, she is still very passionate about music and she wants to share her love of music with people. And one of the best ways that she does this is by working with people with their lifestyle and their interests. So when she works with kids, she's very into like, let's make this fun and have it be a really creative thing to practice piano. And then she also really likes working with adults and hobbyists, and that's really working with their schedules and, you know, making sure that it's something that brings them joy and relaxation rather than, you know, frustration. So those are the main things. And yeah, let's get started. Grace, do you have anything to say before I start giving you questions?
No, I appreciate that introduction. That was great.
You're welcome.
This is my first official interview, so I'm excited.
Oh. And we'll have a Q&A after I go through some questions, but feel free to add some into the chat box if you want as well. So, Grace, what was your experience taking piano lessons from different instructors, whether that's growing up or later in college, and how does that inform your teaching?
So actually, when people ask me about my kind of teaching philosophy, there is one example I always bring up, which is when I was in college, my undergrad, I had like the best teacher. We got along so well. We were really on the same wavelength musically. Like he almost didn't even finish his sentence, and I knew what he wanted me to do. Like we were really on the same wavelength. And then he took a sabbatical for one semester, and so I had to switch teachers just for one semester to a different teacher. And the first 3 weeks were rough. I was like crying after the lessons. Like he wasn't being mean. I just didn't understand what he wanted me to do. And it was just really difficult. But like after 3 weeks, it was like he figured out the way that my brain worked. And then he changed his teaching in a way. And all of a sudden it was amazing. Like I learned so much from him, and I'm glad I got that experience to learn from him. But looking back, I actually think he might have been a better teacher. The other teacher, the first teacher, like my main professor, we worked really well together because our personalities were similar and we thought about music the same way. But he taught all of his students that way. So some of his students were like, well, you know, he's a great person, but I just don't get his teaching style. But the other professor, like he changed his teaching style based on how he saw me as a student. So one of the downsides with that is that maybe the first 3 weeks aren't going to be so great because you're like trying to learn how that student learns. But eventually it's a much more fulfilling experience because, you know, you have a much broader way of interacting with people, and you can teach a wider variety of students because you're always adapting. And to me, that makes it a more interesting challenge. You know, I can teach 3 different people the same piece of music, and it's a completely new and interesting and exciting experience for me each time. So that's kind of one little example I have for like the ways that observing my own teachers has kind of affected the way that I myself teach.
Mm-hmm. We actually, yeah, we talk about that in real estate a lot too, is like kind of assessing people's personalities and meeting them where they are at. So it sounds like you really focus on that. That's
what
awesome.
I try to do. It's not easy, but
yeah, it's not. That's great. So what do you think your students benefit most from having you as a teacher? I mean, that obviously is a big part of it, is like meeting them where they're at and like what they need as a student rather than just how you teach.
Definitely.
But what else?
Yeah, definitely the aspect that I personalize my lessons. Something else. So I have another story. There's this really amazing pianist. I think he might still be alive. I don't know, but this was a long time ago, maybe in the 50s or 60s. And his name was George Billette, and he was giving this master class. So he was teaching the student in front of like a crowd. And so the idea is the crowd could learn as well from the lesson or whatever. And so this guy, he'd been a pianist forever. He was like a child prodigy. Like he basically came out of the womb like being a genius at piano. Not fair. And so he was teaching this lesson, and this guy was playing this really complicated piece, and he was just having a hard time with it. And the George Billette was like, oh, just play it like this. And then he sits down and plays it perfectly. And the student is like, I'm trying. Like, like you gotta give me more than that.
Right.
And so basically the idea behind it is if you've actually struggled and you've had to like have these hard times of, I don't know how to do this, and figuring out how to do it, you actually are a better teacher than if you've just always known how to do it. It just comes so naturally to you. So I love music, and it feels like something very close to me and something very natural because I've been doing it for so long. But I have had moments. I mean, in college, I went through, you know, every year I would have an injury from practicing. Like, people don't believe me. People who are not musicians don't believe that you can get a music-related injury, but you can. And so, you know, because of that, one of my huge focuses is on technique and playing healthily and not hurting yourself. I mean, no pain, no gain is not my motto. And because I've had those experiences, and you know, I've had to go through that process of like going back to step one and saying, okay, my technique is hurting me and the way I'm playing piano is hurting me. I need to find a way to play piano in a way that's healthy. And because I've had that experience, I think that I have a unique eye for that with my students, and I can be like showing them from the ground up how to build healthy technique.
That's excellent. And another thing with that is a lot of people try and teach themselves piano. And so that in and of itself is just a reason to take lessons instead of just trying to work it out on your own, because there is a special technique. I mean, I know this like from um I took piano lessons for a long time too, and I had so much tension in my hands when I would play that like I just physically couldn't do a lot of stuff because of how, you know, my technique was not great, and how I didn't even know that I had so much tension at that time. Um,
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, there's the YouTube videos that, you know, are the tutorials or whatever, and those, you know, I don't want to bash those because it's helpful. I mean, a lot of people don't have, you know, money for piano lessons or whatever, so those can be really helpful, but they only give you part of the information. I mean, it's similar to maybe just buying a book of music. It gives you part of the information, but you know, you have to be careful, and you have to really approach it with that same kind of skepticism, in that, okay, this is giving me part of the information, but it doesn't tell me what my hand shape should be, or, you know, which fingers to use or whatever. So you got to be.
right. And they can't cover everything, because one of the benefits of having a teacher is your teacher's looking at your hands when you're playing. And
Yeah.
so they can be like, oh, what are you doing here? But if you're playing with a YouTube video, obviously that's not an interactive experience. So that doesn't happen.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what do you most love about teaching kids?
Well, I just love kids in general. I think they're just a lot of fun and hilarious. And it is a new challenge every time. I mean, you know, I've got some that are just bouncing off the walls, and I have to learn how to get them a little bit more centered and ready to focus on piano. But I have others who like won't say a word, and they're so shy and quiet, and I have to get them to get, you know, a little bit more energetic. And so I like solving puzzles, you know, like they're each their own little puzzle, and I have to figure out how to relate to them and how to interact with them. And I don't know, it just feels a little bit, I get like social anxiety around adults, but with kids, like, I don't know, we just have a common spirit or bond, or I don't know. I just feel, you know, more comfortable joking around with them. And they're not afraid either, you know, because when it's adult to adult, there's this like, you know, if I ask them, oh, just make something up on piano, just play some notes, they're like, what do you mean? Like, I don't know how to do that. But a kid, they'll just be like, you know, they'll just go crazy. And so you can use that to your advantage and be like, okay, we're gonna go crazy, and I kind of trick them into learning something while they're going crazy. So that's one thing I love about kids, is they're just like, a lot of them, I mean, some of them are kind of shy and don't want to improvise at first, but in general, they're more open to experimentation. And yeah, it's fun. It's fun. I feel like it's cliche to say working with kids is fun, but it just is. I mean, it just is.
So, I mean, obviously I have a bit of a bias because I have a composer background, but like, what would you say is important about improv and teaching piano?
I mean, I was raised not, I don't know how to improvise. I was never taught how to improvise. So what I do know is something that I've kind of taught myself, but that's something that I've kind of, like the classical music field is kind of biased towards you read the music. And I think reading music is really important. And I teach all of my kids to read music, but I teach all of my kids to improvise as well, because I think a lot of it is this kind of feeling of like you do one or the other. But for me, like if you're a musician, you should be able to do a few different things. And so much of music is working with your ears. And if you're able to improvise, if you're able to learn by ear, you have just a stronger musicianship in general. And a lot of other instruments do more of that. For some reason with piano, it's just there's this bias against improvising if you're in classical music. But like there's like the Suzuki method that's often used with strings, and that's really based on learning by ear. Piano, I've known like one or two people who have done that method where they learn by ear on piano, but really not a lot. And so that's something I think is really lacking. And I don't know many other classical pianists who actually teach improvisation. I don't really know many other teachers that do that. So I guess that's another answer to the other question you had, which is what is the benefit from learning with me, is I really try to emphasize the creative side of it. as well. So
That's great. Did you feel like you were missing out because you didn't have improv?
yeah, I felt like a little bit like it wasn't like that's not fair. I mean, I felt I don't want to sound whiny, but like I feel like it's not hard to teach. Like it's not something that's I think that really the bias against it is kind of an emotional one. It's like, oh well, you know, we don't do that. We play Beethoven around here. We don't want to. We're how because the idea is like, how could I ever compare to Beethoven? Which he's just a person. I mean, like he wrote really good music, but like if you never try to make up your own music, then you'll never compare to Beethoven. You know, but if you are encouraged throughout your experience growing up, and you know, like I said, the kids are more open to doing that. By the time, you know, adults get around, they're so scared to because they've learned their whole life like, oh, I'll never be Beethoven, I'll never be able to make something up. But if you don't have that belief that you can do that you can just try. And so much of piano is just teaching my students that it's okay to fail. Like 90% of the time we're going to do it, it's not going to turn out the way we want it to.
So that's so important.
Yeah, exactly. And then, you know, that 10% that we get it feels really good because, you know, we've been working so hard. And so.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that even professional musicians screw up. They're just really good at covering it up.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what I tell all my students all the time. I'm like, you know, most of piano is just learning how to fake it. I mean, and you know, that's kind of a generalization. Like, obviously, I would like my students to play the right thing and have it sound good. But if a lot of it is also teaching the showmanship side of it and the way, you know, the confidence. If you walk out on stage with confidence, you don't even have to play your first note. People are already believing that you're going to play it correctly because you have that confidence there.
Yeah, for sure. So what do you love about teaching hobbyists and adults?
I love it so much. I only started teaching adults, I guess, 2 or 3 years ago. And mostly it was because I've always wanted to teach adults, but it's harder to get adult students because of what I was talking about. There's this kind of nervousness or fear. And also just adults are busy. I mean, sometimes it's hard to find time for, I mean, music is it's a hobby that takes a lot of time. I mean, you have to practice, you have to spend time working on it. But you know, in my experience these past few years having adult students, it's been so much fun. I mean, you know, one of the benefits to teaching adult students is they do what you tell them to the first time. As kids, you have to ask like 10 times. I've spent a whole lesson with a kid just trying to get them to put their hands on the piano, you know? So the first lesson I ever taught to an adult, I like got through everything I'd planned and we had been like 10 minutes into the lesson for like a 30-minute lesson. I was like, what am I going to do for the next 20 minutes? Because it went a lot faster than it usually does with teaching kids. So a huge benefit is that, you know, there's a little bit more. And along with that, sorry, I'm a little bit ADD. Sometimes I don't finish my sentences. Along with that, there's this, if an adult signs up for piano lessons, it's something they're interested in. It's something they want to do. If a kid signs up for piano lessons, sometimes it's the mom or the dad or whoever, the parent or guardian that is wanting them to do that. So sometimes with kids, I spend a lot of my time convincing them that they want to learn piano. Whereas with adults, that step is already accomplished. You know, they're there, they want to learn. Sometimes they don't have time to practice, but there's always that like intention there and that desire. So, and then another thing with adults that I love is like getting to learn a lot of different kinds of music. I mean, you were talking in the very beginning how I, you know, tailor my lessons to my students. And one thing I've learned about so much music from this music that my adult students want to play. You know, I'm there for them. So I'm like, what do you want to play? We'll get there. So I have one student who she loves like kind of like new age, like soft piano. Like, you know, if you type in YouTube, like dreamy piano music or something, which I really, to be honest, that's not my favorite kind of music in the world. But she's like, she picked this song she really wanted to play and we worked on it. And, you know, by the end of it, I was like, oh, that's a really pretty song. Like, I actually really like that, you know? So I get to learn a lot about music just from the kinds of music that my students want to play. And it's fun. Like with adults, you have a little bit more flexibility. They've lived in the world longer. You know, sometimes you ask a kid, like, what kind of music do you want to learn? And they're like, I don't know. But, adults, they have musical tastes by that point, and they're like, oh, well, I like this kind of music, and you can kind of start from there and explore.
Yeah.
If that answers your
When
question.
I first started, it was, this was when I was a kid, and it was the entertainer.
Mm.
That's what I wanted to play, was the entertainer.
I
So,
actually have a student who I was like trying to figure out what she wanted to play. Wasn't going too well. Like we tried a bunch of different things. She wasn't really feeling it. And then the entertainer, she actually taught it to herself. I don't know if she used YouTube or something. I was like, great. All right. Ragtime. Let's go.
yeah, that's awesome. So we've talked all about all about lessons. What other services do you provide besides piano lessons?
Yeah. So my main thing is piano, but I have 2 master's degrees. I tortured myself in university. So I also have a degree in musicology, which people are always like, what is musicology? The study of music, and that's I guess the root of the word. And it has to do a lot with music history, but I like to think of it more as like the way that music works in society, and usually that's from a historical standpoint. But it's really a more academic side of music. And so, my musicology, well, my piano degree was playing piano. My musicology degree was reading books and writing papers. And, I remember I was, when I was just about to start my musicology degree, everybody was like, well, like that means you're going to be writing a lot. And I was like, and what's the problem with that? Like, I love doing that. And so part of the reason I decided not to go into academia and not become a college professor is because I wanted the freedom to do a little bit of both, to keep teaching piano, but also keep this musicology kind of passion of mine. So that's kind of the preface to answering your question, which is I've tried to do some workshops in the past that are like a music appreciation type format, but not exactly, because I kind of, I'm never one to stay inside the box. But kind of a more music history, music theory type, like classroom type thing, like with more discussion and listening to a lot of different kinds of music. So I've had some of those classes in the past. I don't have any coming up now, but if any workshops were to appear, they would be on my website. I just started, I kind of decided that whether anybody's going to pay me or not, I want to do musicology. So I started a free weekly email list. And so basically what it is every Monday, if you were to sign up for this list, you would get a kind of guided digestion, I guess, of one piece of music. So I'd give some background information about that music or the person who wrote it or performed it. And then like a really short little guided listening. So things to listen for as you listen to it. And so that's just kind of my way of sharing the wealth, so to speak. And it's my way of giving myself little homework assignments to do each week. And I mean, homework sounds really boring. I'm trying to make it really interesting and accessible to musicians or non-musicians, just to kind of get a picture. I mean, my overall mission in my life and career is really to I love interacting with people who aren't professional musicians. And because I think people don't realize how much they already know about music. I mean, I meet so many people who are like, oh, well, I like classical music, but I don't really know a lot about it. Or I love jazz, but it's like, I don't know anything about it. But if you listen to it and if you like it, you already know a lot about it. And so part of my mission is just to kind of help people get to that point where they can develop an opinion and have kind of the tools to defend that opinion on their own and be like, and basically giving the terminology to what they actually already know and have internalized. So I have a few different projects related to that, like the free weekly email and the workshops that I like to do. I just put this out on my website and nobody's signed up for it yet. So we'll see if anybody wants to do it. But I want to do a personalized music theory course, which is if like someone were to want this course, they'd give me a list of like 15 to 20 of their favorite pieces of music. And then I'd use those pieces to teach them music theory. So I basically write a little personal course just for them. So it's kind of expensive since it is personalized. But to me, you're not gonna, I mean, I was homeschooled. I was about to say sorry if I'm talking too much, but then I realized you're interviewing me, so I'm supposed to be talking.
Yeah, keep talking.
Okay. So I was homeschooled from 6th grade to 10th grade, and it was an incredible experience, and that really worked for me. Homeschooling doesn't work for everybody, but like my sister, she was only homeschooled for 2 years because it didn't really work for her. But for me, it really worked because I am kind of a self-motivated person in the first place, and then the experience of being homeschooled really taught me that people don't learn things unless they want to. I mean, you can learn for the test, you can cram, you can put it in your head, but a month later, I mean, if you're not excited about it, it's not going to be there anymore. It was just there for the test. And so that's why going back to the whole piano thing, that's why I teach my students songs that they want to learn, because then they'll be motivated to sit down and practice it. And you can teach technique through anything. And so same thing for this music theory course. I mean, so many music theory courses are based on music that maybe you don't care about, or you only care about some of the music they're showing. And so it becomes really like, I mean, it is academic, but it becomes like dry and like the boring version of academic. And so with that, the idea is anybody can learn music theory. You just have to learn it based on something that you're actually interested in. And I'm always, go ahead.
Even if there's like a pop song that someone's like, oh, I really like this, you would be into doing that as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Cool.
I'll do anything. I mean, honestly, music theory is probably best learned through something like pop music, because pop music, like annoying people will criticize pop music. It's like it's dumb because it's not complex. But it's just, there's different standards of complexity. And also, who decided that complexity is the most important thing in music? I mean, like, it just seems so arbitrary to me. So, yeah. You know, like, maybe the harmony only uses a few different chords, but one of the most interesting things in pop music to me is the texture. I mean, there's always like these different synthesized sounds that are happening and different layers of sounds that, yeah, it's fascinating to me. So, yeah, I would get excited. And something I love about, honestly, most of the things I'm doing is really selfish because I get to learn about new music. You know, like when I'm like, what do you want to learn? What do you like to listen to? It opens up a whole new like genre even sometimes of music that I can listen to. So, yeah.
That's great. Are you still doing your like meditation sort of listening?
Oh, like the YouTube thing I made? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I actually was just thinking this morning I should do that again. So, I made a YouTube video. I've been trying to figure out how to get YouTube famous, but the problem is I'm not making any videos. So
that would help, yeah.
But I did make one video and put it out there just for fun. I mean, I just kind of like experimenting, doing whatever. But it's basically like a guided meditation, but it's musically based. So basically I guide you to imagine like, oh, imagine you're hearing a piano, and now imagine you're hearing some drums or something like that. And then I try to make it, I guess, relaxing. I had a friend tell me he almost fell asleep during it. So I guess it worked for somebody.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think I'd like to do more of that. And yeah, just, I mean, my whole thing is just music. Music is my life. And so most of the things I do are music related, you know.
I especially love the meditation one because it makes people realize that they can use their imagination for things as well.
Yeah.
And if you do continue with music, like that's a really important skill to have, is to like be able to kind of imagine in your mind what it's going to sound like. And you can use this as a practice technique as well. So when you're like preparing to play a piece of music, you can rehearse it in your mind. And yeah, it seems to work really well. So
I mean, a lot of it is developing the ear. And I don't really like saying this because, so part of I feel like my mission in life is to help people learn how to listen. And I don't really like saying that very much because I don't want to imply that people don't know how to listen to music, because they do. So maybe it's better to say to learn how to listen critically, or to learn how to get, everybody's been in that place. Not everybody, I don't want to assume. Many people have been in that place where they're listening to something and they're really listening to it. They're like following everything that's happening. And that's a different way of listening to music than having it on in the background while you're chatting with friends or making dinner or whatever. And both of those ways of listening are valuable. But I think people assume that because, you know, like maybe classical music it feels very academic, or it feels like you need to know background information, that they don't even try to sit down and like listen note by note and like really get immersed in it. And even if they do, you know, that's great. Or they don't apply that to something else, like pop music. Like there's this idea pop music isn't smart, or doesn't have any depth, which will make many people just, you know, use it as they're driving and not really bother to get immersed by it. So honestly, what I would be teaching in my workshops even is a kind of meditation. It's like how to just stop everything and just focus on that music, because actually that is a skill. I mean, I remember I went to a summer program when I was in like 10th grade or something, and it was like a music summer program where I did music stuff. And I went to so many concerts. They had like a concert every night. And I remember getting mad at myself. I was like, why can't I focus anymore? And I was like, Grace, you're going to a different concert every night. You need to chill out and just like stop being a perfectionist. But it is like, you know, after that summer, I did feel like a lot more attentive with like being able to like calm myself and like focus on the music and not think about grocery shopping or whatever. I was in 10th grade. I wasn't grocery shopping, but you know, whatever. um, um, So yeah, actually, I didn't even realize that till you kind of brought that up. Is like, I guess everything I'm doing is a little bit related to some idea of meditation. Is like a little bit of you know, kind of guiding your mind and what to focus on and what to listen to. I don't know a whole lot about meditation. I feel a little bit like a poser when I'm making that YouTube video. But from what I understand, you know, it's kind of like letting things come in and go out of your mind, and kind of training your mind. And so I think music can be a really valuable tool in that way, that it gives you something to like be at peace with. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I think so. So you hinted at like different like missions and what you want to do and that sort of thing. But can you give me a statement on what your why is?
Yeah, sure. So I've talked a little bit about my why, my general why, in terms of, you know, I want non-musicians to be able to develop the skill of really listening to music intently and having the confidence to develop their own opinions about music and to articulate those opinions. And so that's kind of like the overarching thing. And then I have like little, you know, specific things for what I do. And so specifically with piano, playing, I mean, aside from like listening to music being really beneficial, being able to play music is like the next level up almost. It's like so beneficial in so many ways. And I was talking to another music educator in Kansas City, and he was talking about, he runs a nonprofit, Bass Academy of Music. And actually I work there one day a week teaching music there as well. But he was talking about how people are always emphasizing like, oh, well, if your kid knows music, then they'll do better in school and they'll have less behavioral issues and all of this stuff, which is, I mean, there's research backing all of that up. But he kind of brought up, he's like, why isn't just knowing music enough on its own? Like, why does it have to be they do better in school? Why isn't the fact that they can play the piano like incredible enough, you know? So I kind of, in my heart, always come to back to that. It's like, I love music and I want to share music with the world. I mean, that sounds so cheesy, but it's I guess that's just how I feel about it. And then to kind of argue with myself, I guess, beyond that, there's things about music that are just so incredibly helpful for life skills and things that have helped me that I just want to share. And so some of those things being, I mean, sometimes I feel like a therapist. I mean, we talk about emotions all the time in lessons. I mean, and with the kids too, you know, kids, they have to develop an emotional vocabulary. I mean, they're not born knowing all of these words. They don't know the word melancholy. You know, they just know sad or happy sometimes, you know, depending on what kind of books they've been reading or who they've been talking to. And so part of what I'm doing is like a thought process I go through a lot with my kids students is like, or even with my adult students is like, okay, how do you want your audience to feel when they hear this piece? Like what emotion do you want to give? And so let's say they say, and sometimes to get past the idea of like happy versus sad, I'll like ask them to give an image, like, oh, well, this makes me feel like how I felt when I went to the circus, or, you know, whatever kind of image they have. And then I'll be like, okay, what can we actually do in the music to make that happen? So maybe we need to play it quieter or louder or something else. And so it's really kind of like really going in depth with like your emotions and like analyzing those emotions and being able to talk about them, which I think is a skill that really sometimes doesn't get developed. I mean, it just really depends. Some kids are really good at that. Some kids don't really get that kind of speak. And you know, I've been recently feeling really bad for men because they just don't get to talk about their feelings. It's not like a lot of men aren't in societies where it's open for them to talk about their feelings. So I feel like the little boys who are taking piano, like I feel like it's my mission to like let them talk about their feelings and let them be able, like, even if maybe their friends will make fun of them if they're saying they feel a certain way, they can at least go home to the piano and express that there somewhere, you know. I don't know if they do or not. That's kind of my dream, but you know. So yeah, this kind of developing this emotional intelligence. And then beyond that, I was talking earlier about just learning how to fail. That's another thing. It's a really vulnerable place. And I've had students, you know, it's a really difficult spot to be in as a teacher, because what I'm asking my students to do is fail in front of me so that I can guide them, you know. And it's really like, I'm critiquing them. That's my job, is to listen to them and then tell them how to do it better, which you have to be really sensitive. Some kids are very sensitive, and if you're telling them, oh, let's improve it this way, what they hear is, I played it all wrong and it's bad and it's awful, you know. So you have to find a way to be like, that was really good. And you know, and so something I ask them too is like, they'll play their piece for me and I'll say, okay, so like, what did you do well? We'll start with that, because there are a lot of things that you did well. Even if they just put their hands on the piano, that's a starting point. And so this kind of idea of like healthy self-critique, that's hugely important. And like knowing how to improve yourself, but doing that with this confidence in yourself that you can improve. And then, I mean, these kind of things are like obvious for the kids. With the adults, they're still working on those kind of things. It's just maybe at a different, higher level, you know, and it might not be as obvious, you know. I'm not like as obvious with my adult students. I'm like, oh, you know, what are you feeling today? I mean, obviously I ask them how they're doing or whatever, but it's a little maybe a bit less like therapy, but it's still related. And there's still this idea of like, what is this music expressing, and what can we do to express that? So that's kind of my why with piano teaching, is first of all, just music is awesome. And that's my first why. And then beyond that, this kind of emotional learning and development, and a healthy self-critique.
I love it. I mean, that's definitely why I got into music as a kid, was because I had a difficult time, you know, expressing my feelings, and music really helped with that.
We'll do it, yeah.
So I want to make sure that we have enough time. So wanted to open it up to anyone to see if anyone had any questions for Grace. You can go ahead and unmute yourself and talk, or put it in the chat box.
I can say, oh, sorry, I'm Danielle. Can I ask a question? Sorry about that.
Yeah, go for it.
I was wondering what you've done and how you've worked through the challenges of now teaching virtually, or if you are teaching in person, and the steps you're taking to feel safe with you and your students. If you can answer that question.
Yeah, sure. Very good question. So I am teaching completely virtually still, and my website says I'm doing it through August, and I guess I'll just reevaluate at that point. A month or so ago, I was like, I'll probably start doing the option to have in-person lessons in August. And now I've seen a couple graphs that have really scared me about, you know, cases and everything. So now I'm like, maybe I won't be able to. But the good news is that online lessons have been incredibly successful, way more successful than I ever thought that they would be. I mean, it's surprising how quickly you can get used to like the new medium. It still can be very frustrating. I mean, there's nothing beats being there, you know, and being able to put your hand on the piano. But some of my students actually do better online. For some reason, they're a little bit more open, or they're used to that kind of interaction. So yeah, I'm a very like safe is better than sorry type person. And if the online is working, I mean, I haven't lost any kid students due to being online, and I've only lost 2 adult students. One is actually a nurse, so I'm like, you take all the time you want. Like, I know you're really stressed out right now, so it's okay. And she actually has had a couple lessons, which I'm like so surprised by that she was able to, take, if I were her, I'd just be like sleeping when I'm not at work. Like, that's just supposed to be so exhausting. And then I had another student who was just very overwhelmed by things and wasn't able to continue online. But yeah, so it's been successful. I mean, I don't have the most high tech setup, like it would be nice if I could get like a little webcam up here, but I looked that up. Webcams are expensive. I did not know how expensive they were. But yeah, so it's working. It's working. It's stressful. And I've been very flexible with, I have an attendance policy, and like if you give me, you're supposed to have to give me 24 hours notice. And if you cancel within those 24 hours, then you still have to pay, and I can't make it up. But I've been a lot more flexible with that, because everybody's stressed out right now. It's not a great time. And what am I doing? I'm just sitting around at home anyway. So if you want to do a last minute change, I've been a lot more open with that lately. So yeah, it's been a crazy experience, but it's been good. It's been overall, and it's opened up possibilities to me that I never would have thought of. I mean, like I never would have thought that like, oh, I can offer online lessons, but now I'm willing to accept students from all over the country who can continue to take online lessons even when I go back to being in person, which I've been like, oh, technology is inferior to the person, which, is not always true. And I just started this thing called Practice Club, which is online. So like on Tuesdays and Fridays at 3 p.m., all my kid students, we meet on Zoom. Well, not all of them. Whoever wants to come can meet on Zoom. We talk for like 5 minutes, and I get them to tell me like, okay, so what are your goals for this practice session? And then I like put them all in their own like little room. So basically they just like go off on their own and they practice for 20 minutes. And then I'll like go check in on each of them, ask them if they have any questions, and then we'll get back together at the end. And so that's an idea I did steal it from somebody, so it's not my idea, but I would have never have thought to implement that like before this whole thing, because I was so uncomfortable with technology and uncomfortable with the idea of doing that. But now I'm like, this is a great idea. Like now maybe my kids will actually practice, they'll have this kind of motivation to do that. So in some ways it's been really hard, but in others it's opened up a lot of doors. So
I love that. And especially how you can like create this sort of community with the students that, if they're just coming in for their lessons one at a time, they don't necessarily have that.
Right.
So that's great.
Yeah. And piano can be kind of isolating, because I mean, you go to the orchestra or you go to band concerts, it's not usually a piano. So we don't usually play in ensembles. So it's kind of, it's a good way to introduce this kind of community aspect. Yeah.
Also, you might want to check the price of webcams, because I know that they spiked when everyone was needing them for work, and they've dropped since then. So check it out.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that. That's true. Okay, I will check again.
Anybody else have questions?
I could ask another one. I'm just teaching a couple students right now, and one is so enthusiastic, practices like crazy, and the other, they're both teenagers. The other is shy and hard to draw out. I feel like I finally made practice. Something you said kind of spoke to me, like she's talking about being shy, and she was like, how are you not shy? And I told her like more about my journey with shyness, and it was like the first moment or glimpse of like, oh my gosh, we got somewhere. Yeah. And I think a lot of it for me is probably patience, but do you have tips on how to work with the different speeds of students as they're getting comfortable with you and as they're opening up, and just even tips to get to draw them out a little or to earn their trust? Or is it really just patience?
No, that's a really good question. So a lot of things are coming to my brain. I'll try to say them in an orderly way. So it kind of goes back for me to the idea of personalizing your lessons. So the way I teach, I like to teach by asking questions like, how do you think that we can make this better? And that doesn't work as well for my really quiet students because I ask them that and then there's just like, crickets for like 5 minutes. And I'll sit there for a while because I want to give them this space to, maybe they're just trying to get their courage up to say something or they're thinking of something. So I'll sit there in the silence for a while, but some of them, it like gets more and more awkward and like you can tell they're just not going to say something. And so, I like to teach by asking questions, but with my students who really, they kind of put the wall up with that kind of approach, I really have to change everything and do it a different way. I have an example. I do have one student who it took me probably over a year for me to really, and she still doesn't really talk. And so I started out this whole like kind of not aggressive, but like, what do you think? How was your week? She'd just be like, good, like that's really, really reserved. And so I had taken her on from another teacher who had moved to Arizona or something. So I messaged him. I was like, how do you get Rachel to talk? Like, what do you do? And he's like, oh, you don't. Like, she just doesn't. Like, she's just a quiet person. And that kind of resonated. I was like, oh, okay. So I just need to do this differently. Like, what I'm doing isn't really working. And she's probably like feeling uncomfortable. So what I did with her is I did a lot more showing than telling, which is usually a better idea anyway. But like, I'd be like, and she's also really good at learning by ear. So I'd be like, oh, play it like this. And then she'd just do it. And she opened up a lot that way, which was her way of expression. She's one of my better students. Her way of expression is playing. Like she doesn't feel nervous about playing. And it happened all the time where I'd be talking and she'd just interrupt me and start to play. I'd be like, oh, okay, that's right. This is what we're supposed to be doing in a piano lesson. We're supposed to be playing, And then I have another student who I actually just had this experience where she's very quiet and she's nervous. And I have this problem too. I'm so afraid of saying a wrong answer. Sometimes I won't say anything. And so if I ask her a question and she feels like there might be a wrong answer, I know she knows what the answer is, but she's just afraid to say it. And so she'll get in this space where the more she feels overwhelmed, the less she says. So what I found with her is like, I have to structure my lessons in a very specific way that she feels comfortable, and then I can start introducing some of the harder questions. So she loves to improvise. Like she'll just go crazy when she improvises. So I'll open it up being like, let's make up a song about a bunny rabbit. And then she's like, okay. And then she does it. And so then that kind of like breaks the ice. She feels a lot better. We keep going. And then I'll start being like, can you play a C major scale, or what note does this start on? I'll start asking like harder questions. And then by that point, she'll be relaxed enough that she'll start to stiffen up a little bit. She'll start to get a little bit quieter, but she's still open enough that doesn't completely bring up her wall, so to speak. So it's really, and she's gotten to the point where she's actually really talkative to me, and her mom's like, wow, she opened up to you. Like, that's amazing. Like the first student I was talking about, she still really doesn't chat with me, but we've gotten to this point where we can really communicate, and like our lessons are super productive and we're able to do everything. I just kind of accepted that, oh, this is not a talkative person. Like, I'm not going to get to know about her boyfriend or her whatever, like that's just not going to be our relationship, and that's okay. I'm here to teach her piano anyway. So I don't know if that helps at all, but a lot of it has to do with patience, but then just trying different things. And it might take a long time. It might take a long time.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. That's all really good stuff.
You're welcome.
Anybody else have questions?
How much are your lessons for children?
I do a monthly rate. So I do, it's for half-hour lessons, it's $120 per month.
Really? Wow. That's wonderful. So, how often per month?
So it's once a week, and it's, 30-minute lessons once a week. So some months you get 3, some you get 4. So it's basically my way of like giving myself some paid vacations every once in a while.
Right, girl. I don't blame you at all. Not one bit. Yeah. I've been wanting to get one of my little ones into it, but I just don't know. I think it would be a good outlet for her right now since I think she would enjoy succeeding at it. But how long does it take for like a child to catch on? I know that's a hard answer, but
it's really different with every kid. And so the usual age that I start is at around 5 is pretty young. Usually I start at 6, but I will take a 5-year-old. And if it's a particularly, precocious child, I'll take them earlier. But usually what happens is they'll develop with their age. And so they'll start, and I'll teach them all kinds of things when they're 5 and 6 years old. And you'll be like, why is this kid still so bad at playing? Like, why does it still sound like this, But it's like, as soon as they turn 7, all the things that I've been teaching them, they're like, oh, and they get it. And there's this like, for some reason, it's like 7 years old. There's just this like miracle moment where they're like, oh, I get this. This makes sense. And so it's actually like, you could start a kid at 7 and start teaching them all those things. But if you've been teaching them those other 2 years, then they've already got that kind of in the back of their minds, and it starts making more sense to them. And another thing, I mean, it's kind of like, other like sports or dance or something, it is muscle development. I mean, and so some kids, their hands are just so tiny, there's only so much they can do. And so as they're getting older, so my mom tells me that, and then there's the aspect of like spark. When do they get that moment of like, piano is cool, I want to play it all the time? Like, because that's a whole nother thing. Some kids never get that, and they're just like, I don't care about piano, it's not my thing. And other kids are like so ready, they're excited to go to their lesson and everything. So my mom told me that it was around 3rd grade, it was like a total about face. At first I was like frustrated, didn't want to practice anything, and then in 3rd grade I was like, this is my thing, I love this. So it's different with every kid, but generally based on the ages, it does have a certain like progression. Does that answer the question? I don't know.
Yes, that's perfect. I appreciate you. And where are you located? Like, what area?
I currently live near the Art Institute near Midtown and Westport, but I'm actually moving in October, and we're probably going to like Waldo area or potentially near 39th Street. So kind of in the near Kansas City proper.
Nice. Okay, cool. Well, I will definitely keep that in mind and get your contact info from Anna.
Definitely. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. And I have one more silly question, because I know nothing about music. What does it mean by getting immersed into, like, I know this is so embarrassing, but like, I'm so grateful for Zoom right now, because I would have probably never came to something like this because life,
Yeah, totally.
But like, I'm able to, and Anna's a good friend of mine, and I just have learned so much from listening to you, Grace. So thank you.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much.
So, but I do need to know that just so I feel better about my date. What does it mean to get immersed in the music?
Yeah. And so are you talking about like when I'm talking about playing music or more listening to it?
Well, like how you were talking about the pop music, and like when people say that sometimes.
Right.
I'm trying to remember exactly what you said. Like, it's kind of like, I don't know. You repeat it. I'm lost.
Sure.
I
know what you're talking about now. So there's this kind of idea, and like classical musicians can be very elitist. And this is one of the reasons I kind of decided not to like be in academia, is because it's very classically based. And there's this kind of idea that like, oh, well, pop music is like, it's not complex. It's like dumbed down. They don't use a lot of different chords or something. And I think that even some people who like pop music kind of have this idea like, oh, well, I know it's not smart, but I like it anyway, which I think is just wrong. I mean, I just think that that's wrong, because if you can't judge something by something else's criteria. Like if Beethoven only used 3 chords, yeah, that would sound really dumb. But that's because he's just like with his, like, I mean, for an example, like if you're just playing a piano piece and you just use like, well, I mean, that goes back to the same idea where it's like, who decided that complexity was good? That was what you want, So sometimes simplicity can be what you want. And then the other thing is that pop music isn't always simple. It might be simple in one respect, but not in another respect. So to answer your question, I think what a lot of people do is when they're listening to pop music, they don't really just sit there and like, they don't listen to pop music like as an experience. They don't turn off everything, close their eyes, and like, I'm gonna listen to Taylor Swift or whatever, Some people might. I don't want to like speak for all people everywhere. But I think in my experience and the people that I've interacted with, they turn on the radio in the car when they're cooking. But it's a different experience to just sit down and just focus on the music, and just literally that's all you're doing is just listening to it and having this experience be just you and the music. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yes, yes, yes. So that's what it means to get immersed in the music, is to like literally take it all in.
Yep, exactly.
I don't do that with any music, but I mean, maybe a form of meditation, that sounds pretty relaxing, honestly.
Yeah, it really can be.
Yeah, which leads me to my last question I was thinking during this. Do you have like any experience with like disabled or like autistic children that maybe could benefit from like relaxing a little by playing?
I don't specifically have experience with autism, or really the main like I guess I don't really know all the proper words to you, like non-neurotypical or whatever experience I have is with people that have ADD, and a lot of times it's actually something like that I'm noticing that their parents haven't even told me. And I know this because I am definitely ADD. I've never been diagnosed, but I've like read about it a lot. And so that's really my only experience. I haven't taught anybody with autism, but I have had friends, piano teachers, who have had students with autism. And yeah, I think that could be hugely beneficial. And I think that that having a teaching style, and the teachers that I've known who have taught those students, they do talk about, oh, you have to totally change your teaching style, so
Yeah.
you kind of are forced to have this flexible teaching style. And a lot of them have a similar thing, like if they're less verbal, it really is kind of a show and tell type thing. It's like, okay, I'm going to play this and you're going to copy me. And so music can be really helpful for that, because you don't really have to speak. You're like, I mean, that's what I do for a lot of my students. If they're confused about something, I'm like, okay, I'm going to play this 2 ways. You tell me which way is the right way, And so a lot of it is just this kind of show and tell type thing. But I can't speak specifically to that since I've never had a student with that. But as far as like ADD kids go, I mean, I know in my life, I don't know where I'd be without music. I mean, I don't feel like I have severe ADD, but I think part of it is because I've learned a lot about how to handle my brain through practicing piano. And I've learned what works for me, and like how to navigate practicing and how to organize that has really just helped me with like my life and like knowing how I function in the world. So yeah, I think music can be really helpful for any kind of person,
Yeah, I agree. Because I was thinking for my little brother, he has autism, but I know that he really likes to focus in on stuff, and this could be something like for you to almost offer to people like, hey, this, because a lot of them that like he doesn't fit in with sports and stuff like that, but something that he could put his energy into that would reap him many benefits. I feel like that might be something. So
totally, definitely.
I appreciate you. Thank you, Grace.
Yeah, thank you so much. Great question.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in like autism and music, look up Oliver Sacks. He's
I've heard that name before. I'll write that down.
He has done so much research. Well, he's passed away, but he's done so much research on like just all sorts of different ways that music is a therapy to a lot of people, and it's super interesting. He has a lot of books. Oliver Sacks. And we have a question from Yvette in the chat box. Did I say that right? Are you taking new students at this time, and how is it different from pre-COVID?
Yeah, I am. I'm actually looking for, my goal is to get like 5 new students by the start of the school year in August. So I am looking for new students at this time, both kids and adults. It would be interesting to start a brand new student over Zoom. That is something I haven't done. Well, actually, that's not true. I had one student who just signed up for lessons. We had one in-person lesson, and then it was quarantine. And so he's mostly, and he's a younger one. He's like 5, like he's pretty young. And he's done really well with starting completely on Zoom. So that's been an interesting but really good experience. But like I said, each kid is going to be a little bit different. So starting someone completely online is going to be a little bit trickier. especially with the kids, because a lot of like my first few lessons are like how to hold your hand, and I can show them, but sometimes it helps for me to actually like manipulate their hand and tell them how to hold it. So it will be an experience for sure, but I am taking new students. And I think I talked a little bit about how I'm dealing with COVID and how I'm, you know, transitioning to doing online and being more comfortable with this medium. It's a change for sure, but I've been surprised. I've been surprised at how well it's gone and how I can still feel really connected with my students, even though we're not physically in the same room.
So you're also offering free demo lessons, is that right, for the first?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. So you can have a there's a free demo lesson, and that's no strings attached. So you can take the demo lesson, decide piano's not for you, and I'll send you a follow-up email, but I'm not going to get my feelings hurt if you're like, oh, personalities don't match, or just not for me, I don't want to play piano or whatever. So there's another
Any other question?
Share information for new students. Yeah, so eventually I'll be going back to in-person classes, and you know, what I anticipate is when it's safe to do in-person classes, I'll offer that as an option. And then I think I'll continue to do online lessons and just kind of have it be both, whatever everybody wants. But yeah, if you get on my mailing list, I'll be able to, and my mailing list is, I've sent out like 2 emails in the past 3 years. So it's not like a huge commitment to be on my mailing list. And actually I just sent an email out yesterday. It was the first one in like a long time. But I will send out a thing that says, we're in person again. If you were hesitant on signing up for online classes, then we can do the in-person thing again. So I've got your contact info. Yeah. And so my website, just so you know, actually I'll put it in here.
So are you in person right now or no?
No in person right now.
Okay.
Everything's online right now. Yep. And yeah, so on my website, there's a sign up for the demo lesson. If you want to just go ahead and register for lessons, there's a sign up for that. And then I see the people who want to be on the mailing list. I'll add you manually, but there's also an option to add yourself to the mailing list on my website as well.
So can you tell everyone who's maybe listening to the recording about where they can find your information, contact, and all of that?
Oh, yes. So the website that I sent on the chat is odellmusicinstitute.com. So ODELL. That's my last name, odellmusicinstitute.com. And then I'm also as odellmusicinstitute.com. You can find me on Facebook and on Instagram. So I don't do Twitter or any of the other ones. Those are the only ones I do. I'm overwhelmed with just those 2. So honestly, and my personal Instagram page is also public. If you want to follow me on that, just I think my username is just Grace K Odell. And I post some music stuff on there too. So I get overwhelmed by the social media type publication. So I don't post a whole lot on my business pages, but I'm trying to do more. And I will post like important updates, like if we go back to in-person lessons, or, you know, if there's an opportunity to sign up for something, I'll post that on those business pages.
Great. Does anyone else have any other final questions? All right.
This was wonderful.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you all coming and asking your amazing questions and getting the chance to talk with you all.
Oh,
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining and finding out more about Grace. And hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Yeah, and thank you to Anna for this opportunity. It's wonderful.
Yes, thank you, Anna, for the connection.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it's great.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.